Rhea woke with a gasp, her body slick with sweat, pulse hammering wildly against her ribs. The dream clung to her like a second skin, too vivid, too sensory to dismiss as mere imagination. She sat up in the vast four-poster bed, the blue silk sheets tangled around her legs, and pressed a trembling hand to her chest where phantom sensations still lingered. In her dream, she had been caught between two men, Kael's burning touch behind her, his calloused palms moving with possessive hunger across her abdomen, while before her stood a stranger with eyes like blood-soaked garnets. The crimson-eyed man's touch had been cool, precise, his elegant fingers tracing patterns across her collarbone that left trails of ice and fire. Between them she had arched and moaned, a willing prisoner as their mouths and hands claimed every inch of her. Just a dream, she whispered to the empty room, but her body disagreed. Her nipples remained hard beneath her nightgown and between her thighs. An insistent ache throbbed in time with her racing heart. The shoulder bearing her mysterious mark felt uncomfortably warm. Moonlight spilled through the parted curtains, painting silver paths across the floor. Rhea slipped from bed and padded to the window, seeking the cool night air against her flushed skin. The forest beyond Kael's castle stretched like a dark sea, and somewhere beyond it lay the vampire territory, home to creatures she had yet to see, but whose presence seemed to hover at the edges of her consciousness. Had the red-eyed man been one of them, a vampire? The thought sent another unexpected surge of heat through her body. "What's happening to me?" she murmured, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Across Ravengarde, in his opulent burgundy and obsidian chamber, Lucien Nightshade watched Celine, a vampire courtesan, beneath him on black silk sheets. Despite her practiced movements, her moans rang hollow. His mind was consumed by visions of an unknown human woman bearing a glowing mark on her shoulder. "My king," Selene purred, misreading his distraction as desire. As she fed from his neck, Lucien's thoughts drifted to the human in Kael's possession. The mark Valeria described stirred ancient memories of the blood seal and Nyxara's haunting final words. "Find me when I return." Those words had tormented him for 3 centuries. Celine's feeding intensified as she drew his ancient blood. Lucien gripped her waist, his movements becoming forceful as he tried to banish the ghostly presence in his mind. Yet with each thrust, the vision strengthened, the woman's shoulder revealing the intricate blood seal pattern glowing golden against her skin. When release came, it left him trembling with displacement rather than satisfaction. Celine collapsed beside him, dazed from his potent blood. Lucien rose and donned a black silk robe, moving to the balcony of his chambers. Below, carefully manicured gardens stretched toward the forest boundary. Beyond, somewhere in Kael's territory, lay the woman who had invaded his thoughts without even knowing of his existence. A sharp knock interrupted his brooding. "Enter," he called, already knowing who it would be. Cassian appeared, joining him in the balcony, his expression carefully controlled, but carrying an urgency that immediately caught Lucien's attention. His dark hair was immaculately styled even at this late hour, his clothing pristine, though something in his posture suggested he brought troubling news. "My king," he bowed slightly, eyes downcast. "Forgive the intrusion, but we've received an urgent communication from Nightshade Memorial Hospital." Lucien's expression immediately grew serious. The hospital they had established in human territory was the cornerstone of their feeding infrastructure, a legitimate medical facility that provided both cover and sustenance for their kind. "What's the situation?" "A surprise health authority audit, my king. They arrived this morning without warning and are conducting a comprehensive review of our blood allocation patterns." Cassian's voice remained professionally neutral, but Lucien caught the underlying tension. "Dr. Whitmore is managing the immediate crisis, but the scrutiny threatens our entire operation." Lucien's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Nightshade Memorial had taken decades to establish, carefully placed vampire administrators, human staff unaware of the hospital's true purpose. and medical research that provided legitimate cover for their blood acquisition needs. It was their masterpiece of integration with human society. "How severe is the exposure risk?" he asked. "Significant. The auditors are questioning why our trauma unit requires such extensive blood reserves, and our research department's consumption patterns are difficult to explain through conventional medicine." Cassian paused. "If they discover the true volume being diverted for our needs, we lose everything. The alternative feeding methods would be less discreet." Lucien finished coldly. The unspoken meaning was clear. Without Nightshade Memorial, vampires would be forced to hunt directly from humans, increasing the risk of discovery and potentially shattering the careful balance they'd maintained. "Dr. Whitmore has proposed a solution," Cassian continued. "Falsified research documentation for an experimental plasma therapy program, complete with manufactured government approvals and academic partnerships. It would explain our blood usage patterns while actually enhancing the hospital's reputation. And the risks of this deception? Lower than continued exposure," Cassian replied immediately. "Though it requires establishing a convincing research facility to withstand potential inspection and ensuring all documentation is flawless." Lucien moved to his desk, fingers drumming once against the polished mahogany surface. "Authorize whatever expenditure is necessary. Purchase suitable property for the Phantom. Research facility and install proper equipment. I want Dr. Whitmore's documentation to be beyond reproach." "Of course, my king. And also," Lucien's tone grew more pointed, "send a messenger to Kael's territory. Inform the Alpha that Nightshade Memorial faces potential shutdown. Protocol demands they are informed of incidents of this magnitude." "As you command." Cassian paused, his expression becoming subtly calculating. "Though perhaps this crisis demands your full attention, my king. With Nightshade Memorial under threat, focusing on peripheral matters might be seen as misplaced priorities by the court." The subtle challenge hung in the air. Lucien's gaze sharpened, recognizing the implied criticism of his interest in the human woman. "Are you suggesting I'm distracted, Cassian?" "Never, my king." Cassian's deference returned immediately, though his eyes retained their calculating gleam. "I merely observe that some among our kind might question allocating resources to curiosities when our very survival infrastructure faces collapse." Lucien studied his second-in-command for a long moment. After 3 centuries of service, Cassian had earned the privilege of speaking frankly, though his tone tonight carried an edge that hadn't been there before. "The human woman and her mark may prove more significant than you realize," Lucien said finally. "But your point is noted. See that the hospital crisis receives immediate attention. It shall be done." When the door closed behind Cassian, Lucien returned to his balcony, his mind now divided between 2 pressing concerns. The hospital crisis required immediate attention, but the woman in Kael's territory continued to haunt his thoughts with increasing intensity. The following afternoon, Rhea stood at her window, watching pack members move purposefully across the castle grounds. Children raced in their human forms, while adults conversed in small groups, occasionally glancing toward her window. Word of her presence had clearly spread. Her confinement had become increasingly frustrating. The luxury of her quarters couldn't disguise their purpose as a gilded cage, complete with guards who politely but firmly prevented her from wandering beyond certain boundaries. The werewolves treated her with cautious respect, but the constant supervision grated on her nerves. When Kael entered without knocking, she turned with a scowl already forming. "I want the guards removed," she said without preamble. Kael raised an eyebrow, amusement briefly replacing his usual intensity. "Good afternoon to you too." "I'm serious." Rhea crossed her arms. "I've been here for days, confined to these rooms like some exotic pet. I've done nothing wrong." "It's for your protection as much as ours," he replied, moving further into the room. In daylight, he seemed less intimidating than at Elder Tharok's burial, though no less commanding. His blonde hair was pulled back loosely, accentuating the sharp angles of his face. "Not everyone is convinced you aren't a threat." "A threat?" Rhea laughed incredulously. "I'm one human woman with no memory. surrounded by supernatural beings who could tear me apart in seconds. How exactly am I threatening? That mark on your shoulder makes you unknown, Kael said, his eyes dropping briefly to where the seal remained hidden, beneath her borrowed shirt. And in our world, unknown elements are treated with caution. Then help me understand what I am. She stepped closer, frustration making her bold. You've told me almost nothing about this mark or why it matters. I catch whispers about oracles and bindings, but no one will explain. Kael studied her for a long moment, his amber eyes unreadable. You are not afraid of me, he stated, as though this still puzzled him. Should I be? Most humans would be terrified to be alone with the alpha of a werewolf pack. Rhea shrugged, surprising herself with her own calm. I told you already. I don't remember enough about being human to know what I should fear. A smile briefly touched Kael's lips. Fair enough. Something about that smile, rare and transformative, sent a flutter through Rhea's stomach that she immediately tried to suppress. Images from her dream flashed unbidden through her mind, and she stepped back, needing distance. The council is divided on how much to tell you, Kael admitted. Some believe knowledge will only accelerate whatever process might be unfolding. And what do you believe? His eyes locked with hers. I believe your instincts run deeper than your memory. I saw it at Tharok's burial. You knew the words to rituals you've never witnessed. That had disturbed Rhea as well. The ancient language had risen to her lips unbidden, as familiar as her own name, despite having no memory of learning it. All the more reason I should understand what's happening to me, she insisted. The emissary from the vampire territories arrives the day after tomorrow, he said. After that meeting, I'll tell you what we know about the mark, which isn't much. But first, I need to understand their interest in you. Perhaps, she pressed, stepping closer. You should tell me your own interest. Something dangerous flickered across Kael's features. You were found in my territory. My wolf recognizes something in you? His voice dropped lower. Some instincts can't be ignored. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with an energy Rhea couldn't name, but recognized from her dream. She became acutely aware of his physical presence, the breadth of his shoulders, the heat emanating from his skin, the subtle scent of pine and something wild beneath it. What instincts? She whispered. Instead of answering, Kael's gaze dropped to her lips. Rhea knew she should step back, maintain the distance between them. This man, this werewolf, was her captor, no matter how comfortable her cage. Yet she found herself moving forward instead, her body drawn to his, like a magnet finding its opposite pole. This is unwise, Kael murmured, even as his hand rose to trace the curve of her jaw with calloused fingertips. Nothing about my situation feels wise, Rhea countered, her voice barely audible. Their argument from moments before transformed into something else entirely, a different kind of tension that crackled between them like lightning before a storm. Rhea pressed her palms against his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heart beneath warm skin and soft fabric. His muscles tensed beneath her touch. When their lips finally met, it wasn't gentle. Kael kissed her with a fierce possession that stole her breath. All teeth and heat and hunger, Rhea returned it with equal fervor, her fingers digging into the solid wall of his chest, her body arching instinctively against his. His arms encircled her waist, lifting her effortlessly until her feet barely touched the ground. The mark on her shoulder began to pulse in time with her racing heart, emitting a faint golden glow, visible even through the fabric of her shirt. Kael growled low in his throat, the sound vibrating through her body and igniting something primal in response. His hands moved lower, gripping her hips with bruising intensity as he walked her backward until she felt the cool stone wall behind her. The contrast between the cold surface at her back and Kael's burning heat at her front drew a gasp from her lips, which he immediately captured with another hungry kiss. Time seemed to suspend as they consumed each other, the outside world fading to insignificance. Rhea had no memory of ever being kissed before, yet her body responded with an instinctive knowledge that transcended conscious thought. She nipped at his lower lip, drawing a deeper growl from him as his hands slid beneath her shirt, tracing the sensitive skin of her waist. When his fingers brushed the edge of her mark, a jolt of energy surged between them. Kael jerked back with a hiss, his eyes flashing from human amber to lupine gold. The sudden transformation startled them both. Kael stepped away, his chest heaving as he visibly fought for control. The struggle played across his features, his wolf pushing for dominance while his human side resisted. His canines had lengthened, pressing against his lower lip as he clenched his jaw. "Your mark," he managed, his voice deeper, rougher. "It reacts to me." Rhea touched her shoulder, feeling the warmth beneath the fabric. "What does that mean?" "I don't know." Kael closed his eyes, his breathing gradually steadying as he regained composure. When he looked at her again, his eyes had returned to their normal amber. "But it proves you're not just a random human who crossed our border." The intimacy of moments before had vanished, replaced by the wary distance of their earlier conversation. Rhea felt a pang of loss she couldn't explain, an emptiness where moments ago had been consuming fire. At the door, Kael paused, his hand on the ornate handle. "I'll have the guards removed," Kael said abruptly, straightening his rumpled shirt. "But I'll assign Mara to accompany you instead. She'll show you more of the castle grounds within limits." It was a concession, albeit a small one. Rhea nodded, not trusting her voice. After he left, Rhea pressed her fingers to her swollen lips, the ghost of his kiss lingering like a brand. Whatever connection had ignited between them was clearly tied to her mark, and to secrets not yet revealed. She moved to the window, watching Kael's retreating figure cross the courtyard below. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the controlled way he moved, a man fighting his own instincts. The memory of his eyes flashing gold sent another shiver through her. Exhaustion suddenly crashed over her like a wave. The emotional intensity of their encounter, combined with the lingering effects of her erotic dream, left her drained. She settled onto the window seat, intending to rest for just a moment, but her eyelids grew heavy as the afternoon sun warmed her face. Sleep claimed her without warning. The vision struck with the force of a physical blow. A battlefield stretched before her, but not one from any human war. The ground was scorched black, littered with bodies that bore the telltale wounds of supernatural combat. Throats torn by fangs, chests ripped open by claws. The metallic scent of blood hung thick in the air, mixing with smoke and something else, something darker that made her soul recoil. At the center of the carnage lay two figures, motionless and broken. Kael sprawled on his side, his human form bearing wounds that would have killed any mortal man 3 times over. Deep gashes across his chest leaked crimson onto the blackened earth, and his left arm was bent at an unnatural angle. His face, usually so commanding, was pale as death, his breathing shallow and labored. Beside him lay the stranger from her dreams, the man with crimson eyes. In the vision's harsh light, she could see him clearly for the first time. His features were aristocratic, almost classical in their perfection, framed by dark hair now matted with blood. His elegant clothes were torn and stained, and a jagged wound across his throat suggested he'd come perilously close to true death. His chest barely rose and fell. Around them, the bodies of werewolves and vampires lay intermingled. Warriors from both sides who had fallen in whatever catastrophic battle had taken place. Some wore the leather and fur of Kael's pack, others the dark elegance she somehow associated with vampire nobility. All were still, their ancient rivalry ended in shared death. But it was the echoes of pain that nearly drove her to her knees. Wave after wave of agony crashed over her, not physical pain, but something deeper. Anguish, loss, desperate fury, and beneath it all, a grief so profound it threatened to tear her apart. The emotions weren't her own, yet they felt intimately familiar, as if she'd carried them in her bones for lifetimes. Through the psychic maelstrom she heard whispers, fragments of voices, speaking in the ancient tongue she'd somehow known at Thurrock's burial.
Sigillum debilitatur.
The seal weakens.
Vinculum deficit.
The binding fails.
Paratus esse debes.
You must prepare.
Ante quam tenebrae redent.
Before the darkness returns.
In the vision, she tried to run toward the fallen figures, but her feet wouldn't move. She was trapped, forced to witness their suffering while remaining helpless to act. The mark on her shoulder burned like fire, pulsing in rhythm with the pain that surrounded her. As the vision began to fade, she caught sight of something else, a figure standing at the edge of the battlefield, wreathed in shadows so deep they seemed to devour light itself. She couldn't make out its features, but its very presence radiated malevolence. When it turned its attention toward her, she felt a cold that had nothing to do with temperature seep into her bones. Then she heard its voice, ancient and terrible. "Soon, little oracle, soon." Rhea jerked awake with a strangled cry, her body soaked in cold sweat. The vision's intensity left her shaking, the phantom pain still echoing through her bones. She pressed her hands to her chest, trying to calm her racing heart, but the images refused to fade. Kael and the crimson-eyed stranger broken and dying, the battlefield of corpses, the shadowy figure whose very existence seemed wrong, twisted, evil, and that voice, ancient, patient, terrifyingly familiar, calling her oracle. She stumbled to the wash basin, splashing cold water on her face with trembling hands. In the mirror above, her reflection looked haunted, her green eyes wide with residual terror. The mark on her shoulder throbbed with a steady heat that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. "Just a dream," she whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. This hadn't been a dream. It had felt too real, too immediate. It had been a vision, a glimpse of something that might come to pass. But when, and why had she been shown this particular horror? The whispers echoed in her memory. The seal weakens. The binding fails. She must choose. What seal? What binding? Choose what? A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Miss Rhea?" came Mara's voice from the corridor. "The Alpha sent me to escort you, if you'd like to see more of the castle grounds." Rhea steadied herself, forcing her voice to remain calm. "Just a moment." She changed into fresh clothes, trying to shake off the vision's lingering effects. But as she opened the door to greet Mara, one thought echoed relentlessly in her mind. The battle she'd seen felt inevitable, as if the threads of fate were already weaving toward that terrible convergence. Kael and the crimson-eyed stranger, who she now suspected was the Vampire King himself, would face something dark and powerful together. And somehow she was the key to it all. "Are you feeling all right, dear?" Mara asked, her werewolf senses clearly picking up on Rhea's distress. "You look quite pale." "I'm fine," Rhea lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired. I'd love to see the gardens." As they walked through the castle corridors, Rhea tried to focus on Mara's cheerful commentary about pack life and castle history. But beneath her polite attention, her mind raced with questions and growing dread. The vision had shown her a future where the two most powerful beings in Ravengarde lay dying. If that future was real, if it was approaching, then whatever was coming would be far worse than the political tension currently simmering between werewolves and vampires. And the voice that had called her, Oracle, suggested she wouldn't just be a witness to the coming darkness. She would be at its very center.